The air at forward operating base Kestrel tasted of grit and vaporized diesel. It was a fine, baked powder that coated the tongue, settled in the lungs, and etched premature lines into the faces of young soldiers. Into this furnace of tension and simmering boredom stepped Chief Warrant Officer for Anya Sharma. She arrived not by a sleek C-12, but on the tail ramp of a dusty, overworked Chinook that had been ferrying ammunition and mail. She carried a single, worn duffel bag and a black Pelican case that seemed surgically attached to her left hand. Her fatigues were crisp, but of a slightly older cut, the fabric faded from 1,000 washes. The lines around her eyes were deep, not from age alone, but from years spent staring into the sun-blasted distances of places like this, or into the green-hued digital glow of a cockpit. She was 51, a fact her files stated plainly but her movements defied. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation. She moved with the quiet economy of someone who had long ago burned away every superfluous gesture. The pilots of the 12th Attack Reconnaissance Battalion, mostly young, ambitious captains and warrant officers in their 20s and 30s, watched her from the shaded porch of their ready room. They saw a relic, a technical advisor sent from some stateside command to consult on the new Block 3 avionics package for their AH-64E Apaches. To them, she was a bureaucrat in a flight suit, a creature of PowerPoint presentations and maintenance logs, utterly alien to the visceral world of combat flight. "Look at that," murmured Captain Jake Viper Evans, his voice a low, confident drawl that always commanded attention. He was the squadron's golden boy, with a jawline as sharp as his ambition and more confirmed kills than anyone else on the base under 40. "They sent us a grandmother to check our software." A few of his acolytes snickered. "Careful, Viper," another pilot chimed in. "She might write you up for a loose cable." Sharma seemed oblivious, or perhaps indifferent. Her eyes weren't on the mocking pilots. They were on the flight line, scanning the row of Apaches. She wasn't just looking. She was assessing. Her gaze lingered on the rotor heads, the exhaust shrouds coated in fine dust, the specific sag of the Hellfire racks on Gunship 4. It was the look of a master craftsman inspecting a set of familiar, if slightly neglected, tools. She walked past the ready room without a glance, her boots making soft, rhythmic puffs in the thick dust. Her destination was the cramped, air-conditioned container that served as her temporary quarters. Inside, she didn't unpack her personal items. She opened the Pelican case. Nestled in the custom-cut foam was not a laptop or diagnostic equipment, but a helmet. An AHADS, integrated helmet and display sighting system. It was an older model but immaculately maintained. The surfaces were worn smooth in places from thousands of hours of use. She ran a gloved finger over the monocle, her expression unreadable. She set it down, then spent the next hour assembling a detailed maintenance query for the battalion's S4, noting discrepancies in turbine temperature logs and rotor vibration data she had somehow absorbed just by looking at the aircraft from 100 feet away. She was a ghost in the system, her presence noted on a Manning roster but utterly ignored in the daily rhythm of the FOB. For 3 days, she spoke to almost no one, observing pre-flight checks from a distance, watching the gunships lift off into the hazy sky, and listening to the crackle of comms in the Tactical Operations Center. She was a silent, patient predator, learning the terrain of her new hunting ground. The men saw a quiet, aging woman. They had no idea they were in the presence of a legend who had simply gone dormant. They saw a librarian. They were blind to the warrior who had written the books they had never been cleared to read. Their dismissal was a thick, soundproof wall. It would not last. The desert had a way of tearing down walls. The briefing room, known colloquially as the cage, was General Marcus Thorne's personal theater. A 2-star general with a political star on the rise, Thorne commanded with a booming voice and an unshakable faith in doctrine and aggression. The walls were covered in maps, threat matrices, and grainy satellite photos. At the center of it all, Thorne stood before a holographic map, his chest puffed out, basking in the focused attention of his pilots. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice echoing slightly in the crowded container. "Intel has confirmed it. Omar al-Masri, the butcher of Kandahar, is holed up right here. He jabbed a finger at a glowing red circle on the map. A dense, labyrinthine district in a city 60 miles away. He's planning something big. We are the tip of the spear that is going to shove that plan right back down his throat. Captain Viper Evans stood near the front, a slight, confident smirk on his face. This was his show, and Thorne was his biggest fan. The plan was classic Viper. A high-speed, low-altitude approach, guns blazing, overwhelming the target with speed and firepower. It was bold, loud, and left little room for subtlety. Viper and his wingman, Stryker, will lead the assault, Thorne continued, his eyes gleaming. They'll punch a hole through any rooftop resistance, clear a path for the ground element, and stay on station to turn anything that moves into a fine red mist. It's a textbook hammer and anvil strike. Questions? The room was silent. The plan was risky, but it was the kind of mission that made careers. In the back, leaning against the wall near a humming server rack, Anya Sharma stood motionless. She hadn't been invited, but as the senior warrant officer on base, she had the right to attend any operational brief. Her presence was a small, incongruous detail in Thorne's perfectly orchestrated performance. Thorne's eyes scanned the room, and for the first time, they settled on her. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. He didn't recognize her rank or specialty, only that she was out of place. "And you are?" he barked, the jovial commander vanishing in an instant. An aide leaned in and whispered, "General, that's CW for Sharma, the avionics tech advisor." Thorne's face relaxed into a patronizing smile. "Ah, the tech advisor. Forgive me, Chief. Didn't realize we had backseat drivers in the audience. Running diagnostics on my briefing." A ripple of sycophantic laughter went through the room. Evans shot a smug glance over his shoulder at Sharma. She didn't react. Her face was a placid mask, her eyes fixed on the holographic map. She was looking at the details Thorne and Evans had ignored. The narrowness of the streets, the height of the buildings, the lack of viable emergency landing zones. She was seeing the trap, not the target. Her silence seemed to irritate Thorne. He saw it as meekness, not discipline. He decided to make her the punchline of his pre-mission pep talk. He gestured expansively toward the flight roster. "You know," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "these new Block 3 birds are so advanced, they practically fly themselves. Full of computers and gizmos." He looked directly at Sharma. "Tell you what, Chief, after my boys here get back from bagging the butcher, maybe we'll let you take one up for a spin. A nice, gentle joyride. See what things look like from the front seat for a change." The room erupted in laughter. It was a brutal, dismissive joke, painting her as a ground pounder, a technician who could only dream of what real pilots did. It was a public castration of her authority and experience, delivered by a man who couldn't tell the difference between a maintenance manual and a flight checklist. Captain Evans laughed the loudest. He caught her eye and gave a theatrical, pitying shrug, as if to say, "Sorry, that's just how it is." Anya Sharma did not smile. She did not frown. She did not look away. She simply held General Thorne's gaze. Her dark eyes were perfectly still, reflecting the glowing red circle on the map between them. In that moment, she wasn't seeing the general or the laughing pilots. She was seeing the mission, and she was seeing the dead. Thorne thought he had landed a punch. He had no idea he had just armed a bomb. The quiet in her corner of the room was suddenly the loudest thing there, a pocket of profound, unnerving calm in a sea of arrogant noise. She gave a single, almost imperceptible nod, an acknowledgement not of his authority, but of the words he had spoken. Then she turned her attention back to the map, her mind already flying the mission, calculating the variables, and foreseeing the failure that was now all but certain. The thumping blades of two Apaches, Viper 1 and Stryker 4, sliced through the hot afternoon air, their shadows racing across the baked earth. In the cockpit of the lead ship, Captain Evans felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, a heady cocktail of confidence and controlled aggression. The plan was simple, and he was the best there was at simple, violent work. The comms were clean, the systems green. It was, he thought, a perfect day for a hunt. 20 minutes into their flight, The sky betrayed them. On the horizon, a wall of brown appeared. It wasn't on any weather forecast. A haboob, a monstrous, churning cloud of sand and dust, was rolling in from the south, moving with unnatural speed. "TOC, this is Viper 1. Evans broadcasted, his voice tight with annoyance. "We have an unforecasted weather front moving in. Looks like a major sandstorm. Advise." The voice of General Thorne came back, strained. "The window is closing, Viper. Al-Masri is scheduled to move in 30 minutes. You need to push through. The mission is a go." "Roger, pushing through," Evans said, though a knot of unease tightened in his gut. He flew into the edge of the storm, and the world dissolved. Visibility dropped from 10 miles to 10 feet. The brilliant sun was snuffed out, replaced by a suffocating brown twilight. The Apache's advanced sensors, designed for night and fog, struggled against the sheer density of the silica particles. The PNVS display flickered, the crisp green lines turning to noisy, indistinct fuzz. It was then that hell erupted. The first sign was a high-pitched squeal in Evans's headset, the unmistakable tone of a missile lock. "Man-pads! Brake right, Stryker! Brake right!" he yelled. He threw his aircraft into a hard bank, flares spewing from the dispensers. A streak of fire shot past his canopy, close enough to make the acrylic creak. But his wingman wasn't as lucky. "Viper, I'm hit! I'm hit!" Stryker's voice was a panicked shriek. "Engine fire warning. I'm losing power. RTB, Stryker. Return to base. Now," Evans ordered, his own heart hammering against his ribs. He watched his wingman's crippled gunship limp away, trailing smoke as it vanished back into the brown murk. He was alone. Gritting his teeth, he pushed on. Doctrine dictated that a lone ship should abort, but Thorne's voice was in his head. The tip of the spear. He descended, leveling out over the rooftops of the city district, a ghost navigating a nightmare. His threat display, which had been quiet moments before, lit up like a Christmas tree. Multiple manpad signals, dozens of small arms radar signatures. The intel had been catastrophically wrong. This wasn't a handful of guards, it was a layered, integrated air defense zone. And then the new tone came, a deep, steady growl that made the blood freeze in his veins. It was the search and track radar of a ZSU-23-4 Shilka, a self-propelled anti-aircraft gun. A dragon in a box canyon. "TOC, they have a Shilka. I repeat, they have an active Shilka in the AO," he screamed into the mic. The Shilka's radar locked onto him. The growl became a solid, piercing scream. He was painted. He had seconds. He yanked the collective, pulling the Apache into a near-vertical climb, a desperate, panicked maneuver. The quad 23mm cannons of the Shilka opened up, a torrent of tracers hosing the space where he had been a moment before. The concussive force of the shells buffeted his aircraft. "Aborting! I'm aborting!" he yelled, his voice cracking. "The zone is black. I say again, the zone is pitch black. Mission is impossible." He turned the gunship and fled, flying blindly back into the storm, every sensor screaming at him, his arrogance shattered and replaced by raw, primal fear. Back in the TOC, the mood had curdled from confident aggression to frantic chaos. Stryker 4's emergency landing was being coordinated while Viper's panic transmissions filled the air. General Thorne's face was a mask of purple fury. He slammed his fist on the holographic table, causing the image to flicker. "Impossible?" he roared, rounding on the terrified intel officer. "You told me RPGs and rifles. You didn't say anything about a goddamn Shilka." The officer stammered, "Sir, the intel was from a human source. We had no satellite confirmation because of the cloud cover." "Excuses," Thorne bellowed. The ground team, poised at the edge of the city, radioed in. Their window was gone. Al-Masri's convoy was reportedly already forming. The entire operation, months in the planning, had collapsed in less than 5 minutes. Blame was flying like shrapnel. Men were yelling, phones were ringing. The mission was over. Failure was absolute. Into this maelstrom of recrimination and despair, A single, calm voice spoke, cutting through the noise with the precision of a scalpel. "There is a way." Every head in the TOC turned. Anya Sharma had moved from the back of the room and was now standing at the edge of the holographic table. She hadn't raised her voice, yet she commanded the room's absolute attention. The chaos subsided into a stunned, expectant silence. Sharma placed a single finger on the glowing map, tracing a thin, forgotten line that snaked through the city's oldest quarter. "The Haboob is an asset, not a liability. Provides cover. Their Shilka uses a legacy flat-face radar system. The dense particulate matter will severely degrade its acquisition range and tracking ability. It will force them into visual or thermal targeting, which is near impossible in this." She looked up, her gaze sweeping over the stunned faces of the command staff before landing on Thorn. The textbook approach from above was doomed. The solution is to go under. Through the old Roman aqueduct channel here, her finger traced the path. It's a covered, subterranean ingress. It opens into the canal system 2 blocks south of the target building. From there, you fly a sublevel urban canyon route. High risk, zero margin for error. But it bypasses their entire early warning net. Captain Evans, who had just stumbled back into the TOC, his face pale and smeared with sweat, scoffed audibly. "That's insane. It's a tunnel. The rotor clearance would be inches. You can't navigate that on sensors alone. That's a suicide run." Sharma turned her head slowly to look at him. Her expression was not one of contempt, but of clinical assessment. "Parameters are for training, Captain. This is a solution." She spoke the words with an unnerving finality, as if stating a law of physics. She didn't wait for Thorn's approval. She turned to the duty roster projected on a side screen, her eyes scanning the names. "I need a co-pilot gunner," she stated, not asked. "Warrant Officer Wunchin. You have the highest simulator scores in the battalion for TADS targeting in adverse weather and confined spaces. Get your gear." Young David Chun, who had been trying to make himself invisible, froze. All eyes fell on him. He was known as a quiet, competent technician with quick hands on the targeting controls, but he had never seen real combat. He looked from Sharma's impassive face to the general's apoplectic one. Thorn was trapped. His career was flashing before his eyes. His golden boy had failed. His textbook plan was in ruins. He was left with an insane proposal from a woman he had openly mocked just an hour earlier. It was desperation, not inspiration, that made his decision. He gave a single, jerky nod. "Fine," he bit out, the word tasting like acid. "It's your funeral, Chief." Sharma didn't acknowledge him. She was already walking toward the door, Chun scrambling to follow like a nervous duckling. "Meet me at Gunship 7, she said over her shoulder. "Tell the ordnance crew I want a custom loadout. 4 APKWS pods, 2 Romeo model Hellfires, and a full drum of PGU 45/B high-explosive dual-purpose rounds for the gun. Nothing else." On the flight line, the wind was a physical force, whipping sand into stinging sheets. The ground crew for Gunship 7, a battle-scarred Apache that had been passed over for the mission, was in a frantic rush. Sharma arrived and the chaos stopped. She moved with a purpose that bordered on serene. "Slow down," she said to the crew chief, her voice calm but firm. "Haste makes graves. We will be meticulous." Her pre-flight check was unlike anything they had ever witnessed. It was a ritual. She didn't just look at the components. She touched them. She ran her bare hands over the leading edge of the main rotor blades, feeling for delaminations the size of a hair. She placed a palm against the TDS/PNVS turret, as if sensing its electronic soul. She personally inspected the loading of every missile, ensuring the contacts were clean, the connections secure. The young ordnance techs, who had been among those snickering earlier, now worked with a silent, focused intensity, their movements mirroring her own precision. Chun watched her, his own panic slowly receding, replaced by a growing sense of awe. She wasn't frantic. She wasn't scared. She was working, like a master watchmaker preparing to assemble a priceless timepiece. When she finally climbed into the front seat, the co-pilot/gunner station, and began her cockpit checks, Chun slid into the pilot's seat behind her. "Chief," he stammered. "Shouldn't I be in the front? I'm the gunner." Sharma didn't turn around. Her hands danced over the control panels, bringing the machine to life. "I need your eyes on the TADS, Chun. I'll handle the gun. And I'll be flying from here." She flicked a switch, transferring flight controls to the front seat, a configuration that was technically possible but almost never used. "Breathe, son," she said, her voice a low hum over the intercom as the turbines began to whine. "Just breathe, and call out what you see." Chun took a ragged breath and looked at the woman in the seat before him. He no longer saw an old tech advisor. He saw a commander. As the Apache lifted into the churning, brown chaos of the Haboob, he had the distinct feeling he was flying with something not entirely human. The world outside the canopy ceased to exist. There was only the swirling, opaque brown of the sandstorm and the eerie, monochromatic green of the pilot night vision system. Anya Sharma did not fly into the storm. She became part of it. The Apache descended, not with the jarring drop of an aircraft in distress, but with the smooth, deliberate motion of a submarine diving into the abyss. Below them, the ancient Roman aqueduct appeared on the thermal display, a faint, cooler line against the hot desert floor. "Here we go, Chen." Sharma's voice was a steady, calm anchor in the roaring chaos. "Stay on the TADS. Your world is that screen. Nothing else matters." She nosed the gunship down and guided it into the mouth of the aqueduct. The transition was terrifying. One moment they were in the open, albeit blinded, sky. The next they were in a stone tunnel. The tips of the rotor blades were, as Evans had predicted, mere inches from the curved stone walls. The sound changed instantly. The roar of the wind replaced by the reverberating thunder of the twin turbines and the percussive whump-whump, whump of the blades echoing off the claustrophobic confines. It was a sound no Apache pilot had ever heard before. Chen's breath hitched. On his screen, the thermal image was a perfect, terrifying tunnel. He could feel the vibrations of the rotor wash buffeting them against the stone. Any updraft, any shear, any miscalculation of a single inch would mean instant, catastrophic failure. But Sharma flew as if she were driving down a suburban street. Her inputs on the controls, visible on Chen's multifunction display, were impossibly small, preternatural. She wasn't reacting to the turbulence. She was anticipating it, meeting it with micro-adjustments before it could even affect their trajectory. 200 meters to the canal exit, she said, her voice as level as if she were ordering coffee. Stand by for RPG threat. Hi, from the east-facing rooftops as we clear the channel. They burst out of the aqueduct's terminus into a wider, man-made canal, still flying below street level. The city rose around them like a forest of concrete and steel. Just as she had predicted, a thermal bloom appeared on a rooftop to their right. RPG. Rooftop. 3 o'clock. Chun yelled, his training kicking in. Before the words were fully out of his mouth, the nose of the Apache yawed slightly. The 30mm chain gun, slaved to Sharma's helmet, let out a short, sharp burst. A 3-round burst. Thump, thump, thump. On Chen's screen, the thermal bloom vanished in a small, precise explosion of white-hot shrapnel. There was no wasted ammunition, no spray and pray. It was surgical. Good call, Chen, Sharma said calmly. Next one. They flew on, weaving through the canyons of the city. It was a deadly, three-dimensional ballet. Another RPG team appeared in a window. Thump, thump, thump. Gone. A heavy machine gun opened up from an alleyway. A flicker of movement, a tiny correction from Sharma's hands, and a volley of APKWS laser-guided rockets turned the alley into a smoking crater. She was a phantom, using the storm's acoustic chaos and the city's architecture as her shield and sword. She didn't fly through the threat environment. She dismantled it piece by piece as she moved. In the TOC, the command staff watched, utterly transfixed. They had patched into her gun camera feed. What they were seeing was not in any manual. It wasn't warfare. It was art. General Thorne stood rigid, his face drained of all color, his jaw slack. Captain Evans watched, his own earlier failure playing in his mind in humiliating contrast. He had flown by the book. This woman was writing a new one in real time, using his aircraft, in conditions he had deemed impossible. "We are approaching the target courtyard," Sharma announced. "The Shilka is dormant, conserving power or waiting for a clear shot. Chun, I'm bringing us to a hover behind the western apartment block. The storm is causing intermittent power failures in the district. I'm going to use the next brownout to pop up. You will have seconds to acquire the target." "What target, Chief?" Chun asked, his voice now steady, imbued with her impossible calm. "Not the Shilka. That's the bait. The real threat is the command and control node for their air defense net. They'll have it somewhere with a view of the courtyard. Look for a cluster of antennas, a generator bloom. They'll think they're safe." As she spoke, the lights in the buildings on Chen's display flickered and died. A rolling brownout. "Now," Sharma said. She didn't climb. She rose vertically like an elevator, using the building as cover. The Apache cleared the rooftop. The courtyard lay before them. The Shilka was there, its 4 cannons pointed skyward, its radar dish rotating slowly, uselessly. "There," Chun said, his fingers flying across his console. "Top floor, adjacent building. I see a generator and multiple comms antennas. Lasing now." "Target acquired." Sharma's voice was cold iron. "Romeo away." She had selected the Hellfire variant with a thermobaric warhead. The missile leaped from the rail, a streak of white against the brown gloom. It didn't aim for the Shilka. It flew across the 100 yards of open space and slammed into the top floor of the office building Chun had designated. The explosion was not a sharp crack, but a deep, gut-wrenching hump. The entire top floor seemed to inflate for a millisecond, blowing out every window before being consumed by a roiling ball of fire. The command node was gone. Immediately, the Shilka's turret began to swing wildly, its operators now blind and deaf. "They're panicking," Sharma noted. "Let's put them out of their misery." She nosed the Apache over, and the 30mm gun spoke again. A long, sustained burst that tore through the thin armor of the vehicle, detonating its ready ammunition in a spectacular secondary explosion. The entire engagement, from pop-up to destruction, had taken 17 seconds. "TOC, this is Nix." Sharma's voice cut through the stunned silence of the command center. "Air threats neutralized. The ground element is cleared to move in. We are on station for overwatch." A collective gasp went through the TOC. "Nix." It was a call sign whispered in training centers and intel backrooms, a ghost story, a myth. On the ground, the Special Forces team, who had been listening to the whole thing on the command net, moved out. "Holy," the team leader muttered, his voice full of awe. "Get us a piece of whatever she's having." Sharma provided overwatch with ruthless efficiency. Her voice was the calm, omniscient eye in the sky. "Serpent 1, you have a 3-man team moving through the breached wall, your left. They are not friendly," the chain gun barked. "Threat neutralized. Serpent 1, Al-Masri is on the move. He's heading for a subterranean exit in the northeast corner of the building. Intercept." Minutes later, the call came. "HVT is secure. I repeat, Serpent has the package." "Solid copy," Sharma replied. "Prepare for exfil. We'll guide you out the way we came in." The most terrifying part of the flight was yet to come. Turning the 8-ton, 58-foot-long gunship around in the narrow confines of the city streets was impossible. So Sharma didn't. She began to fly it backward. "Chen, you are my eyes," she commanded. "Call out every corner, every wire, every piece of rebar." For 10 minutes that felt like an eternity, Chun guided her in reverse, his voice a strained but steady stream of directions. "Clear left. Steady. Power line at 10 feet. Dip 2. Clear. Right wall coming up. Easy. Easy." Sharma flew the Apache backward down 3 city blocks, a maneuver so outrageously complex and dangerous it didn't even exist in simulations. She was flying an instrument approach in reverse with a human being as her primary sensor. Finally, They reached the wider canal and slipped back into the aqueduct's embrace, vanishing from the city as if they had never been there at all. They flew the length of the tunnel in reverse and emerged back into the open desert, the sandstorm already beginning to dissipate behind them. The flight back to FOB Kestrel was conducted in profound silence. Chun just stared at the back of her helmet, trying to comprehend what he had just been a part of. The Apache, call sign Gunship 7, touched down on the tarmac at FOB Kestrel with the gentleness of a falling leaf. It didn't look like a victorious war machine. It looked like it had been through a meat grinder. The fuselage was pocked with hundreds of small arms impacts, giving the olive-drab skin a stippled texture. One of the main rotor blades had a ragged chunk missing from its trailing edge. A long gash ran down the port side where it had scraped against a building. It was a testament to impossible survival. Sharma went through the shutdown sequence with the same unhurried, methodical precision she had done everything else. The whine of the turbines spooled down into silence, leaving only the sound of the still whipping wind and the distant, stunned quiet of the entire base. Every crew chief, every mechanic, every off-duty soldier within view of the flight line had stopped to watch the landing. Inside the TOC, the silence was absolute, reverent. The gun cam feed had gone dark, but the memory of it was burned into every mind present. They had not just watched a mission. They had witnessed a miracle of aviation, a feat of arms that defied every known law of helicopter warfare. It was Sergeant Major Rios, an old, grizzled intelligence NCO who had been in the Army since the days of the Cold War, who finally broke the spell. He had been staring at his terminal, his fingers a blur on the keyboard, his face a mixture of disbelief and dawning recognition. "Nix," he whispered, the name hanging in the air like a ghost. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly in the quiet room. "Sir," he said, addressing the shell-shocked colonel who was now the ranking officer. "Requesting access to Project Chimera archives. Authorization code, Nix Alpha 7. The colonel, his own mind struggling to process what he'd seen, just numbly nodded. Rios typed in the code. A heavily redacted file, classified above top secret, bloomed onto the main holographic display. Sharma, Anya, Chief Warrant Officer 5. Her file hadn't been updated. Call sign Nix. Specialty: Experimental Test Pilot/Tactical Development. Apache Program. The screen filled with lines of text, most of it blacked out, but the visible fragments told a story more incredible than the mission they had just witnessed. Lead test pilot for the AH-64D Longbow Block 1 and 2 upgrades. Credited with developing 17 new evasive maneuvers, including the javelin bait and reverse flow vortex techniques. Sole author of the classified tactical manual TM9-1520X, Extreme Environment and Urban Canyon Combat Operations Doctrine considered theoretical and outside the operational envelope for standard crew. Credited with the first successful live-fire demonstration of the Nix's run ingress profile. Simulation data suggested a 98% failure rate. The room collectively held its breath. The quiet tech advisor that Grandmother Thorne had mocked was not just a pilot. She was the pilot. She was a living legend, the architect of the very tactics that the Army had deemed too dangerous to attempt. She hadn't just flown a risky mission. She had executed a maneuver she herself had invented 15 years ago, a maneuver an entire generation of pilots had dismissed as a myth, a boogeyman story told to scare flight school candidates. General Thorne was not in the TOC to see this revelation. He had stumbled out minutes after she had announced the ground team was clear to move in, his face the color of ash. He was found in his personal quarters by his aide, sitting at his desk in the dark. He was writing by hand on a single sheet of official letterhead. It was his letter of resignation. When his aide tried to protest, Thorne held up a hand, his voice a dry, broken rasp. "I stood in front of my men and I mocked her. I mocked the woman who wrote the book on how to do the very thing I said was impossible. I sent a boy to do a job that required a master, and I almost got him killed." He looked at the paper. "My judgment is compromised. My arrogance has become a liability. I am no longer qualified to command these soldiers." He signed the letter and pushed it across the desk, refusing to meet the aide's eyes. Out on the flight line, the canopy of Gunship 7 hissed open. Sharma unbuckled herself and swung her legs over the side, dropping to the tarmac with a soft thud. She ignored the crowd of onlookers. Her focus was on the machine. Captain Jake Viper Evans approached her, walking slowly, hesitantly. He, who was never at a loss for words, who moved with the easy grace of a born predator, now looked like a lost child. He stopped a few feet from her, his mouth opening and closing silently. The smugness was gone, replaced by a profound, soul-shaking humility. He couldn't form an apology. The words were too small. Instead, he held out the object in his hand, a bottle of cold water, beaded with condensation. It was a simple, pathetic offering, a gesture of ceasefire, a plea for an armistice he knew he didn't deserve. Anya Sharma paused her post-flight inspection. She looked at the bottle, then at the young pilot's face, seeing not the arrogant officer from the briefing room, but a humbled soldier who had just been given a terrifying lesson in his own limitations. She took the water, her calloused fingers brushing his. She twisted the cap off, took a long, slow drink, and gave him a single, brief nod. It was not forgiveness. It was not friendship. It was acknowledgement. The transaction was complete. Respect, stripped of all its ceremonial trappings, had been paid in silence. Hours later, the FOB was buzzing. The capture of Al-Masri was a major victory, a feather in the cap of the entire command. The mess hall was loud with celebration, the story of the impossible flight already morphing into legend. But the legend herself was not there. Anya Sharma was in the cavernous, dimly lit maintenance hangar, the air thick with the smell of grease and hydraulic fluid. The battered form of Gunship 7 sat under the floodlights, surrounded by a team of exhausted but energized mechanics. Sharma wasn't supervising. She was teaching. Wo Chun was beside her, along with 2 of the young crew chiefs who had been part of Viper's mocking audience just that morning. They were huddled around the main rotor hub, a complex nexus of titanium and steel. Sharma had a small toolkit open on a work stand. She was pointing to a diagnostic screen displaying stress telemetry data. "You see this reading?" she said, her voice quiet, patient. "That's the torque spike from the reverse flight ingress. And here," she pointed to a hairline fracture, almost invisible to the naked eye on one of the swashplate linkages, "is the result of the negative G pushover to evade that first RPG. The manual says the airframe can't sustain that for more than 2 seconds. The manual is wrong. Can sustain it for 4, but you have to know what it costs the machine. You have to feel it. The book gives you the rules, but the aircraft tells you the truth." She wasn't boasting. She was transferring knowledge. She was demystifying the miracle, breaking it down into cause and effect, stress and consequence. She was ensuring that the lesson learned was not just about her, but about the machine and its true potential. Chun and the mechanics listened with a reverence they usually reserved for senior commanders, their earlier mockery replaced by a deep, abiding respect. They weren't just fixing a helicopter. They were students at the feet of a master. When she was satisfied with their understanding, she moved away and retrieved her helmet from its bag. She sat on a low stool away from the others, under a single naked bulb, and began her final ritual of the day. With a soft cloth and a small bottle of cleaning solution, she meticulously cleaned the optical surfaces of the Ahad's monocle. It was a slow, deliberate process, her movements practiced and sure. The convex lens reflected the hangar around her, a distorted fisheye view of the world she had so expertly navigated. In its polished surface, her own face was visible, calm, weary, but etched with a profound sense of peace, the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. She finished just as the first hint of dawn began to bleed over the jagged peaks of the Hindu Kush. The deep indigo of the night sky softened to purple and then to a pale, hopeful gold. The light spilled into the open hangar doors, silhouetting her against the new day. She stood, placed the helmet carefully back in its case, and walked to the hangar entrance. She stood there for a long moment, watching the sun climb, feeling its nascent warmth on her face. The news of General Thorne's resignation was already the worst-kept secret on the base. The whispers of her own legend were just beginning. None of it mattered to her. The accolades, the fear, the respect, they were byproducts, exhaust from the engine of her competence. The mission was the thing, the problem and its solution, the impossible flight through the storm. That was real. The rest was just noise. She took a deep breath of the cool morning air. The dust momentarily settled by the night's dew. Another day was beginning. Another set of problems was waiting to be solved. Anya nix Sharma, the ghost in the machine, the quiet librarian of warfare, turned from the sunrise and walked back into the shadows of the hangar. A solitary, unassuming figure ready for whatever came next. Her work was done, but her watch was never over.